Hey everyone, Symphonia here. Today we'll be taking a look at Moze, however you pronounce his name. He will be releasing alongside Facial for the first half of 2.5. So let's start by taking a look at his kit. Moze, I believe, is the first unit with this new mechanic where he can literally leave the field. After using his skill, he marks a single enemy as the prey, deals 150% lightning damage, and then gains 9 points of charge. Charges are used by his talent, and he will enter the departed state when a prey exists, so basically right after you use his skill. This is when he will literally disappear from the field, meaning you cannot target him for healing, or buffing, and enemies cannot attack him either. So it really feels like some assassin mechanics that I guess stays true to the canon. From here on, when allies attack the prey, Moze will deal 1 instance of additional 30% damage, so kind of like Ting Yun. When he deals this damage, he will remove 1 charge, and if he removes 3 charges in total, he will immediately perform a follow-up attack at 160%. Naturally, when his charges reaches 0, he will exit the departed state, or when the enemy is defeated. So there are a few benefits and also a few downsides to this departed mechanic. The obvious upside is that he cannot really take damage, and this can lead to things like increasing the aggro for your other teammates, or just staying alive. Because the normal aggro is split across all your teammates on the field, if you remove Moze, this will increase the aggro for the 3 remaining characters and can be very useful for characters like Aventurine, Blade, Yunui, and Clara. This can also sometimes come back to bite you because you might need more skill points to keep the team alive. One downside is that we cannot buff him as conveniently as well. For example, if you use certain buffs while he is in the departed state, like Bronya Ultimate, he will not get the buff because he literally is not on the field. Hence, you need to use the buffs before he enters the state. Another downside is that he will not give you a lot of skill points, which his other competitors, I guess you could say, like Huntmarch and Topaz, they can be very skill point friendly depending on how you play them. Without his bonus ability, he uses his skill and then he will literally disappear until he runs out of charges and then has to use his skill again. This would normally mean that he is skill point negative, but thankfully his bonus ability gives him back 1 skill point when using his follow-up attack, but it can only happen once per turn. And since the entire duration of the departed state does not count as a turn or taking a turn, he's just SP neutral because he will only get 1 skill point back. Normally this would not matter as much, but in a team with Robin especially and another damage dealer that uses a lot of skill points, kind of like Dr. Ratio, Facial, the team's skill point usage can be quite high, which is why your secondary DPS being Hunt, March or Topaz is very useful because they can use their basic attack and they will not lose out on a lot. Aventurine is very skill point positive or even Gallagher, but you might need to run higher speed to match Facial and Robin's skill point usage. And so if you ever find yourself needing to use your sustained skill, like maybe Gallagher's healing, Aventurine's shield, in harder stages like Divergent Universe and so on, you can definitely slow yourself down a little bit, but I don't think it will affect you that much in the long run. It's just slightly inconvenient, I guess. Finally, his ultimate. It deals 270% attack and immediately launches a follow-up attack. The thing about his ultimate is that, just like Facial, it is considered as having launched a follow-up attack. And I'm going to be super honest with you, I don't quite have access to the creator server, but I think it works a little bit differently because the phrasing is slightly different from what Facial has. If the phrasing is accurate, I think his ultimate is not actually considered a follow-up attack, meaning it cannot be buffed by follow-up damage and stuff like that, but it counts as having performed one, which for example would give Aventurine 1 stack. I believe that is what is happening here, but I guess we will know when he officially releases. The second part of this same bonus ability is that the prey receives a 25% increase in follow-up damage, and that is why Moze is kind of like a budget Topaz. There are obviously some downsides when comparing to Topaz. The first most obvious one is that Topaz literally has twice the amount of vulnerability. The second is that Topaz will apply her Proof of Depth automatically, meaning you can technically run her using only basic attacks. The third problem is that you can very easily change her Proof of Depth with a skill, while Moze you need to wait till you use 9 charges or the enemy is defeated. One small upside for Moze is that his charges are decreased by any attack and not only follow-up attacks like Nami, which is probably why it takes 3 charges instead of 2 follow-up attacks like Topaz. However, you probably still want to run him in a follow-up team because he gives a 25% follow-up vulnerability. So it's not like it really increases his versatility by much. Now for his final and also quite an important bonus ability, Moze gets a 20% advance after his departed state, and at the start of the wave will get a 30% advance as well. The reason why this is a bonus ability is because in the departed state, Moze's speed will not matter, right? And so this allows us to run attack percentage boots because the impact that speed boots will have on Moze is just a lot less as compared to other characters. And so speed is just kinda useless for him. Hence, when it comes to trace priority, it's quite similar to Facial. You want talent, and then ultimate, skill, and then basic attack. He honestly will pretty much never use his basic attack, so if I were you, I wouldn't even level it up at all. All his bonus abilities are great, and you should be getting all of them. And finally, for stats, it's definitely crit damage and attack percentage. He doesn't even really need HP because he will be off the field quite often. For Eidolons, E1 gives him 20 energy at the start of the battle, and every time he loses a charge, he will gain 2 energy. This is more so to make up for the departed state, because not only can he not gain any skill points, he will not gain the normal energy from your basic attack and your skill. So this kind of makes up for that. E2 increases the crit damage dealt to the enemy with prey, and this works very similarly to Topaz E1 or S1. E4 increases the damage dealt by Moze by 30% for 2 turns after using his ultimate. These 2 turns may last longer than usual as compared to other characters because he's stuck in his departed state. So I think it's actually a pretty good Eidolon. And finally, we have E6. It increases the damage multiplier of his follow-up by 25%. Honestly, this is just a really small increase since he goes from 160% to 185, right? It's just kind of disappointing when Gallagher gets something crazy like 20% break and 20% break efficiency, which you cannot really get anywhere else. If I'm going to be very honest, it kind of feels like they are trying to tune Moze down so that Topaz is still going to be the better choice by a fair amount. That's kind of the vibe I'm getting from the kid, I guess. There are definitely some clear weaknesses Moze has that Topaz doesn't. But obviously he is still somewhat useful as a pseudo 4-star version of her and still does pretty good damage. Now onto builds. He has some flexibility, but the best choices are always going to be Pioneer Diver and Duran Dynasty. Pioneer Diver is great on him because of the prey state and his bonus ability. They both count as debuffs apparently, and Pioneer is just kind of the best choice if you are able to apply debuffs. Duran Dynasty I think is also quite obvious if you can use follow-ups and your team uses follow-ups. The buffs you can get from it are pretty big and you can stack it pretty quickly. If for some reason you don't want to run his best in slot, maybe due to a lack of relics and so on, Ash Blazing Granduke, Wind Soaring Valorous, Izumo Gensei, and Inert Sosoto are all decent transitional relics that are about slightly less than 10% worse. For Lightcons, it is very similar to Facial again. Dr. Vicious Lightcon is extremely strong on him for individual damage since he can apply debuffs. Worrisome Blissful is a great supportive Lightcon that again gives Moze quite a lot of everything he wants. Top play is pretty good and he can keep a higher uptime than most hunt units because he can literally only attack a single unit. Of course, we have the classic Cruising in the Stead of Sea, and then we have Final Victor. This is actually going to be better than Only Silence Remains, because with this Lightcon, he loses the buff at the end of the turn, but naturally due to the departed state, it's quite rarely the end of his turn, and so it's a pretty damn good free-to-play Lightcon for Moze. Unfortunately, Moze's Lightcon, the one with him as the picture, doesn't even really work well with him, just like how Firefly's Lightcon doesn't work for her. It gives break effect, which is kinda useless for him, and much more useful for Boot Heal. Now for main sets, I think it's going to be pretty obvious as well, as I've already said speed is pretty useless on him. It's going to be crit, rate, or damage depending on which you need of, attack percentage, lightning damage, and attack percentage rope. Pretty simple, quite straightforward. Now onto his users and his teams, I think it's pretty obvious as well since I've already called him a budget Topaz, but he has a lot of overlapping roles with Topaz being a secondary damage dealer that can somewhat support follow-ups, except his 4-star and slightly worse. Pretty much every team Topaz can be used in, he can be used in as well, so if you don't have Topaz or maybe you want to use double follow-up teams, then you can use Moze in those teams and Topaz on the other, stuff like that. For free-to-play players, he's actually very good for Dr. Ratio, especially because his prey state and bonus ability counts as 2 separate debuffs, while E0 S0 Topaz can only give you 1 debuff. but obviously you would lose out on some damage. And with the aggro manipulation thing, you can run him with Blade, Yuni, Clara, whatever as well. He obviously can be used with Facial. I think it's kind of a no-brainer, but for follow-up units, I think you might not really run him with only AoE follow-ups like Herta or Himeko because you might have better options, or just DUT units like Kafka because she isn't really a follow-up unit at all. It's quite easy to understand what teams you want to run because of his overlap in roles with Topaz. So Facia, Moze, Aventurine, Robin, for example. Ratio, Moze, Aventurine, Robin. Huohua, Uni, Robin, Moze. Huohua, Clara, Robin, Moze. Some Blade, Moze team. So on and so on. But I guess when your role overlaps so much with a pre-existing character, it's quite easy to understand how to build them and how to build teams around them. Anyways, that's pretty much it for this video. So remember to leave a like, and as always, thanks for watching.